Welcome to the Tending Our Nets podcast, where we believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ. We encourage everyone to learn more, and we work to equip believers to share their faith with everyone they know.
All right. This is the Tending Our Nets podcast, and my name is Joshua Sherman. I am your host here. We are talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is our main focus, and diving right back into that after a short break in August. So really excited to be back with you all. I've been reading a number of really good books specifically on the gospel, so get ready for some great material coming up here. But essentially what I wanted to do is start the next series. And what I realized is that the series that I had been talking about the purpose and destiny of humanity was actually better done in two. So I want to start off this series on the purpose of humanity, and we'll get into destiny in a subsequent series. And the main question really when we talk about the purpose of humanity is asking why God created us. And part of that, the main part, I think, is asking and answering the question, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? So this is something that has really been a source of discussion in theology, really since the beginning of the church, because, and even before that, I mean, you talk about, different people talking about it within Jewish circles as well. So it's huge and it has a lot of implications. And unless you think I'm running away from the gospel, I'm definitely not. This has a lot of implications for how we understand the gospel, has implications for maybe even the best ways to spread the gospel, how to talk about certain things, etc. So I think it's very important that we understand this foundational concept very well, and then understand the relationship that it has to these various bits of theology and ethics and mission. So what does it mean to say that humanity is created in the image of God? There are a few different views that have historically been held by people in the church. So this first view is probably the one that's been held the most widely, the longest by the most people, and from your church fathers all the way through reformers, everyone in between. It really is kind of the heavy hitter of views for most of church history. And that is the view that the image of God is a certain attribute or ability of human beings, or maybe a set of them that God has given only to human beings and not to animals. And these help us to somehow resemble God. Right? So you think about ways we might resemble God. Obviously, we're finite; He's infinite, so we can't, talk about any kind of real comparison there. But we can talk about things like reason, or creativity, or self-consciousness, or conscience. Right? These are the kinds of things that people tend to talk about when they talk about the image of God in humanity and what makes us unique. There are some issues, I think, with taking this view, both on a theological and ethical level. And then we'll talk about that as we get into things a little bit more. But right now, just know that I think there's some validity to it, and it actually is connected to the image, but it's not the core of the image, and we'll see that in just a second. The second view is a relational view. So this view is essentially saying that when people are in right relationship with God, they bear God's image, and when they are not, they don't. Again, a number of theological and ethical questions that come up when we start to think about that in more depth, right? So I think, again, this view has some validity to it. I think thinking of it as the main view, or the kind of the core of the image, is incorrect. And I think that thinking of it as a binary where you either have it or you don't is problematic. What I think we see in Scripture is more of a sense of degree, right? So we better reflect God's image and glory when we're in closer relationship with God. And when we're in further relationship or more in disconnection, we don't reflect His glory or His image as well. So I think it's kind of helpful to make those distinctions. The third view is the one that really most biblical scholars at this point, modern biblical scholars, have taken on. And there are reasons for that. We'll get into some of the background on that. But essentially, this is the view that the image of God is more about an identity in a given role or function. So you might think of imagers, that we were made to actively, in verb form, image God. We were meant to represent God, just the way that an image represents the thing that it is an image of. If I snap a photograph, that photograph is not the thing that I took a photograph of. It's not the same, right? It's not the fullness, but it does represent certain aspects of the thing I took a photograph of pretty accurately, right? And so I can start to at least understand a little bit about what I took that picture of when I see the photograph, when I see the image. So we were meant to, at least in this particular view, we were meant to represent God on earth, to represent his rule, his reign, his love. And that really is kind of the primary function of humanity. And that function is something that's actually fulfilled by people that bear the image of God. And bearing the image also is related to being children of God, right? So you could talk about someone being made in the image. It's essentially another way of talking about them being family, being children of someone. So I think this view really is the core of it, that we are made to be children of God. We were made to represent God on earth. And that is the function that we are supposed to perform, that it gives us our identity, our value, our purpose. And then if we think about the other two historical views, a couple of things come into focus really quickly. For one, we can actually see the relational view has validity if we allow for a gradation, right? So a range of things. So do you better reflect the image of God or worse, depending on your relationship with God, versus yes or no, right? And so I do think that's definitely part of it. And I think we see that in Scripture. I think that we actually see Christ's coming and our relationship with Christ helping to reform us correctly and more in the likeness and full image of God. So I definitely think that is part of it. I also think that the attributes like reason, conscience, creativity, etc., are connected to the image. These are abilities that help us to perform the function that we were created for. They are abilities that help us to express what it means to be children of God in some very important ways. Obviously, there are people that don't have all of the abilities that we talked about in the same degree that most people do. And that's one of the reasons that I think taking that attribute view is problematic. But when we look at it in terms of being created to be God's children, that already there gives reason, identity, and purpose to people, regardless of how well they are truly able to perform things that might help them to represent God well. So I think that's really key to understand as we move into ethics and we move into theology. So that is our episode for today. Next time, we're going to be moving into the question of who bears the image. Is this only certain people? Is this all of humanity? Is the image something that only certain, like kings have or something like that? And we'll talk about that a little bit in its historical context, and really looking forward to that as well. So thank you for tuning in, and please like, subscribe, write reviews, and give us ratings so that we can help to spread the word and help equip people to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ effectively with everyone they know. God bless. You've been listening to the Tending Our Nets podcast. If you like what you hear, check us out at the Raven Creek Social Club and by searching for us on social media via Tending Our Nets.